I saw tears flowing down their faces. I saw shackles cutting into their ankles. Beneath the scorching sun, they were being paraded, carrying so much weight on their back. And I'm thinking to myself, how come people are not looking at this?
Yeah.
And then it just occurred to me, it's cultural conditioning.
Welcome to Bearing Weight, a space for the stories elephants can't tell, shared by the people who know them best. Hosted by the Weeping Elephant Project. Welcome back to Bearing Weight. Today we're joined by Sangita Iyer, author, journalist, and founder of the Voice for Asian Elephants Society. Sangita spent decades documenting the plight of temple elephants in India, and her film, Gods in Shackles, brought that reality to a global stage. In this conversation, we talk about what she witnessed, what it cost her, and what she believes it will take to change a culture. So without further ado, let's get into it. We like to open every podcast episode by asking people their elephant origin story. So what first drew you to working with elephants?
Yeah, so it's cultural. I was born and raised in India, in the southern Indian state of Kerala. And my grandparents used to take me to this incredible temple where there was a bull elephant with whom I had a very, very special bond. My grandparents used to take me to the temple, toss me right next to the bull elephant, and go and do the worship. I'm like, I don't want to come into the temple. Let me hang out with this bull. And he would wrap his trunk around me and we would just hang out. Even the mahouts, the caretakers, would walk away knowing that the two of us were safe together. It was such a profound connection. And so that is part of the cultural thing where in general people tend to be in love, but then what happened is when I turned 5, like I was so young, I asked my grandma, how come that elephant has shackles around his legs and how come I don't have chains? So my smart grandma went out and she bought silver anklets and she put them around my ankles. Then I said, no, but I can walk. That elephant anklets are tied together. So when I became a teenager, my grandma shared this story with me and she said, Sangita, I was so speechless when you asked that question. This was at the age of 5. So it seems to me that my destiny had been carved out at that time, but then life took over. We moved to Mumbai, then I moved to Canada, and things happened, right? For career and other kinds of worldly things, right? And then, excuse me, in 2013, I came full circle. I returned to India. I went to Kerala and I witnessed the same elephants who were being used in cultural festivals. When I was a child, there was like a light bulb that turned on. And I started looking at things that other people were unable to, meaning you can look at the elephants plain sight and just look at their majesty and get completely mesmerized and just not look at anything else. But I looked way beyond that. And that's how my reconnection began starting 2013.
What do you think was what attracted you in the first instance? What is it about elephants that's so compelling for you
As a child or
as a child?
it's just the cultural connection for me. And I was also born on Ganesh Chaturthi. Ganesh Chaturthi is Lord Ganesha's birthday. I was born on the same day as his birthday, and that was at 11:30. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I kind of try to l- kind of ask myself, how come elephants? It's just their presence. It's just their in spite of being such giants, they are really gentle. They're really kind. They're compassionate. They're so reflective. I mean, a whole bunch of things, and
No, I
that divine connection as well for me with Lord Ganesha.
Well, it's amazing that at that young of an age you were already questioning the chains and the way that those elephants were living. When you asked your grandma that, do you think that she was caught off guard just because you were young? Or do you think she had never thought about it before herself?
It could be a combination of both. I don't know because I didn't ask her, how come you never thought of this?
Yeah.
And that really raises the question of cultural acceptance, cultural conditioning, right? And so remember I talked about looking at these elephants in their majesty in and you get just hypnotized by them. But I started looking more deeply even as a child. So it was no surprise that when I returned to India in 2013 was looking I was looking at their suffering. I saw tears flowing down their faces. I saw massive tumors on their hips, shackles cutting into their ankles, blood oozing. Beneath the scorching sun, they were being paraded, carrying so much weight on their back. And I'm thinking to myself, how come people are not looking at this?
Yeah.
And then it just occurred to me it's cultural conditioning. Same like my grandmother had come to accept that this is part of the culture.
You've developed a fascinating way to maybe relieve the suffering of these elephants in terms of other projects that you've done. I'm thinking, of course, of the robotic elephants, which are stunning. Tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, so it all began in 2013. The first step for me was to create awareness. So the thing that happened to me was, hey, this is cultural conditioning, but I'm not going to accept that because I need to make sure that I do my part in creating awareness. And so, out of the blue, and this is again like almost like divine intervention as a videographer and a journalist, when I witnessed these atrocities, I just began filming. And when I returned to Toronto, I came back with 25 hours of footage. And I talked to my media colleagues and I said, this is like powerful footage. What do I do with this? And they said, produce a documentary. I said, I've never done that before. I can produce a 3-minute news story, which is what I've been doing all my life. And they said, well, you combine 3 times 10, that becomes 30, and so on. And so that's how my journey into producing this documentary called Gods in Shackles began. Yeah, I raised the money through crowdsourcing. Again, that was the first ever. I didn't know how to raise money because I'm a journalist. And I raised like about $240,000 in total. And using that money, because people were not aware, my film, Gods and Shackles, was the first ever to expose the atrocities against so called temple elephants that are being exploited in the name of culture and religion. And people from around the world poured in their heart and soul and resources. And because of that, I could produce Gods and Shackles. I just followed my heart's calling and it was nominated at the UN General Assembly, 13 International Film Festival Awards. I never expected any of that. In fact, I didn't want any of those recognitions that I received. All I wanted was to create awareness. But those awards, they offered a pulpit to really create, like, amplify the message. Once that happened, I'm like, okay, now I've created awareness. How do I ensure that I offer an alternative? And so that's when I actually created this organization called Voices for Asian Elephants. It used to be called Voice for Asian Elephant Society. And I said, okay, let us start producing projects that will end elephant captivity. And so began more education, going into schools and, offering nature retreat programs, taking them to see elephants, talking to them about their sociality, their emotionality, and how they bond with their family. And then uh, I came across this person in Kerala itself, a designer who was creating these robotic animals. So I asked him, what about creating robotic elephants? And it's life size. The robotic elephant can move his trunk, can move the tail, can even lift his trunk and squirt water, all of the things that real live elephants do. And so many temples have started embracing this for a number of reasons because, it's first of all, it's unsafe for people and elephants. Elephants suffer so much. They're deprived of food, water, and shelter and paraded beneath the scorching sun. And they go insane and they run amok. When they run amok, people get killed. There's so many people, including the caretakers and devotees, who've all been killed. And so many temples have started adopting this. We launched our first robotic elephant in 2024. Then in 2025, we launched two robotic elephants. And in 2026, we launched two more. And then four other temples and institutions have approached us. So next year, we're hoping to launch four or five robotic elephants. And the condition is you'll never use live elephants. So
That's
it's
amazing.
And they have agreed to that. They're not gonna use live elephants as long as they can have access or have this the robotic elephant. That's pretty dramatic.
For the temples that you
yeah.
have brought in the robotic elephants, where have their elephants gone?
So these elephants don't belong to the temples. That's a really important component to cover because it's the private elephant owners who lease out their elephants as though it's like a Mercedes or car being leased out, except that elephants have so much emotions. They
Yeah.
lease it out for a certain amount of money, and per day, I would say per festival, they make so much money. So elephants are transported from festival to festival to festival. The more the festival elephants are taken to, the more the money the private owners make. And so there's just ruthless traveling of these elephants, but behind this open truck beneath the scorching sun. They're deprived of water. They're not given food, and they're transported like through real horrible roads and stuff like that. And
They
so
treat it that way, Sankita. Why don't you feed the elephant I don't mean you. Why don't they feed the elephants and get them shade and get them water? What is the issue?
they're in a rush to make money because when they lease out the elephants, they make money. They mint money per day. An elephant owner gets something like $10,000 during the peak festival season per day, especially when it comes to so-called star elephants. So in their rush to move from festival to festival to festival, they deprive the elephants because they don't have time to feed the elephants, to give water, to shade them, to shelter them. And it is these very elephants that fetch them the money in the first place. So there's this real profound greed and selfishness that takes over, and they just don't care to provide shelter. And I raised all these concerns. And, so their pocketbook is being impacted. And so now they're cyberbullying me and they're calling me an enemy of the culture. Some of them have threatened me, saying that if you come anywhere close to our temple, we'll toss hot oil on your face. And because that's the way they punish women in India, some women, it's part of domestic violence. And, so it's a very sad situation and it's hard, but awareness through this documentary that I created, Gods in Shackles, has really opened up people's thinking, and they started realizing that, wow, for us to enjoy the cultural celebrations, these poor elephants have to suffer so much.
A very powerful
Yeah.
documentary. I mean, we'll link it so people can
Yeah,
access it
absolutely. It'll be
and
linked
and
in the
and
show notes.
and the book as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And that link is actually the Gods and Shackles documentary is now available on Unchained TV
Uh, okay,
for free screening. So I'll share with you the link for that as well.
great.
Perfect, and I'll put that in the show notes for people. I remember a few years ago when I was in Kerala and I was at a temple taking videos of an elephant, and the mahout or someone at the temple must have called the owner. The owner came and was chatting with me, and he said, you can rent this elephant if you want to use him for something, you can rent him." And I was so shocked that, they would approach a seemingly random tourist and come up and say, "Do you want to rent this elephant?"
Yeah.
It's amazing the way that they market these elephants as if it's, like you said, like it's a car or it's any other mode of transportation. It's shocking.
Yeah, exploitation for profit, all in the name of culture and religion. And that's
Yeah.
the thing that people awakened to when they realize that these owners are minting money by making these elephants suffer.
After Gods and Shackles came out and you started trying to show more video footage to people in India and in different regions, What was the response you got from local people who are working with elephants so hands-on in places like temples?
It was a combination. Many of them, I would say most of them were shocked
Yeah.
because they have been perceiving the elephants through a different set of eyes. And so for them, it's all majesty and this adornment and mesmerizing. And then that's what they see in plain sight.
Yeah.
And then, I started looking at this and producing this. When I produced the film, I used my intellectual mind to make sure that it is balanced, it's objective, that it's not offensive. At the
Yeah.
same time, I wanted to also present to them that I'm also Hindu. And so I belong to this state. I was born and raised here. I understand your culture. I understand the religion, but I also know that there's not a single scripture in Hindu religion that suggests that if you use elephants to, parade in the temples, gods will be really happy and bless you. To the contrary, I would say things like Lord Ganesha is shedding tears of blood watching his own species suffer in this manner. I would talk in such dramatic terms because that's how I felt deep in my heart. And I would express it, and they would be like, they would be shocked to hear that. And then, there's always this ego mind that comes in the way that will make me angry towards people who act in this manner. Can you not see the suffering of the elephants? And then there were also those owners who were angry at me for bringing all of this to the world and literally exposing them. And to be very honest with you, some of the owners were interviewed. And that just goes to show that they're so unaware of the
Yeah.
suffering of the elephants. And so what happens is when you kind of start talking to them, you understand, you get to their level and you understand where they're coming from. And then you talk to them. There are some who are genuinely ignorant, there are some who are willfully ignorant. And so they're the ones who really make me real angry. And so I'd have to deal with that privately, not cuss and swear in front of them. But so the reactions were mixed when it comes to the audience. They would they were shocked. Some of them were like, we got to change this. But then many were angry at me and they threatened, and they said that if you came anywhere near our temple, we will kill you. I even received like real life threatening messages,
Yeah.
email messages, that is. And so it was, and then they would cyberbully me. And the cyberbullying was even published in so many newspapers because there are people who would call me cultural enemy and they would say things like, she's making money out of all of this. And I'm like, show me where am I making money?
But also you could say, "You're making money out of this too. You're just making money on the wrong side of it."
And they were actually projecting what they were doing because all they do is mint money out of the suffering of elephants. So they can only see others through their own lens, right?
Yeah.
Through their own worldviews and values. And so, yeah, it was very challenging. But in the past 4 or 5 years, I should say, think public awareness has increased tremendously. For the first 2, 3, 4 years when the movie was released, and by the way, Gods and Shackles was the first and the last ever movie to be screened at the Legislative Assembly of Kerala. This had never happened. And so when that happened, it went completely national, like the local media and the national media, they all went crazy about this atrocities that are being committed against elephants. And everybody started talking about this. And that itself, that conversation stirred a movement, and that's what has inspired so many people to take action against exploitation of elephants. And so I'm really happy that many temples have completely, finally, after 10 years, acknowledged that there are alternatives. All of that has been shattered because of gods in shackles. It's not status quo. It's not religious. It's not cultural. It's all for profit. And that's the message that to me, I think has resonated with people. And now people are slowly starting to take action.
Yeah, and I think that your ability to come in and say, "I am from this culture.
Yeah.
I share your religion. I share your culture. I share where you are from and our families know each other. We grew up in the same place and this is not okay and we need to move this forward." That really amplifies the message to be heard because it's not just some person parachuting into a country and saying, "Hey, I think you're doing this wrong."
Yeah.
It's, speaking out as a local in many senses and saying, "We are on the same team here, and we need to change what we're doing." And that is incredible because that reaches people in a completely different way, and it makes them listen because they're not immediately then gonna say, "Well, you don't understand my religion, you don't understand my culture." You're meeting them where they're at, and I think that is probably one of the reasons that so many people in India were able to watch it and resonate with it because they resonate with you, which is
Yes.
a huge strength.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a really important point because I speak the languages. So I
Mhm.
speak Malayalam, which is a Kerala language, and I speak Hindi, which is India's national language. And so when they try to say something, I just respond in
Yeah,
Malayalam or in Hindi. And when they listen to that, they say, wow, like,
Yeah.
it really makes a difference. They just stop. And I'll be honest with you, the first couple of years, they would say things like, I'm an enemy of the culture and what am I doing? I'm a foreigner. Like, even though I was born and raised in Kerala, they would call me a foreigner coming to India and trying to destroy the culture. But then
yeah,
when I started speaking the language and started communicating with the temple authorities, the priests, etc., they're like, no, she is genuine. She knows what she's talking about.
yeah,
And there were a couple of temple priests whom I interviewed and they spoke out against the exploitation of elephants. So when you speak with like the highest religious authority, then people pay attention.
I know you have other projects, Sangita, that you've worked on and are working on. Tell us about the crossing, the elephant crossing in particular has always interested me. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so one of the great things about India, despite all the insanity and all the atrocities against elephants, India houses approximately 50% of the world's Asian elephant population, and most of them are wild. Approximately 20,000 elephants are wild elephants in India, and about 2,500 to 3,000 elephants are in captivity, unlike places like Thailand and other Asian countries, right? So it's actually a sort of miracle to see a country that also houses the highest number of human population also has the highest number of elephant population. And because of this, in a way, in a very paradoxical way, there's that same cultural connection that kind of helps them to protect the elephants. What happens is when elephants, okay, because of the unsustainable and insurmountable growth in human population, development has become rampant and reckless. And so what they're doing is they're encroaching into the forest land and they're destroying the homes of the elephants and wildlife. So elephants have no place to go. And so they come out, they enter the villages. And when they enter the villages and they keep repeating this, they get easy food, they enter the farms, then they're captured. And when they're captured, they're taken into captivity. In places like Kerala, they use that as an excuse to say, okay, this elephant is already in captivity now. Why not sell the elephant like a commodity? Secondly, what happens is because of the encroachment, elephants are losing their homes. And so they're coming to the villages. And so we understand that villagers need to be protected as well. So, what we have done in Odisha is we have been working with local tribal people and we have employed 200 tribal women. And women are absolutely amazing because they kind of get it. It's almost like a matriarchal society like elephants. And they are helping us plant saplings, and men are helping us create water holes. So we've employed many tribal men and women. And what we have done is we have suggested by protecting elephants, you can also have a livelihood, have a sustainable livelihood. So when conservation and livelihood come together, then it becomes a thriving coexistence between humans and elephants. So that's what we have done. And because of the support of the tribal people, we've been able to secure 52 acres of farmland and transform it into corridor for elephants where we're planting saplings, elephant friendly, fruit bearing saplings. We planted about 100,000 saplings across certain elephant ranges in the central Indian state of Odisha. So that is very, very exciting.
That's super exciting. Have you seen a reduction in human elephant conflict at all as a result of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, they are now starting to adore and admire elephant footprints because
Hmm.
they're not chasing away the elephants. In fact, they're waiting for the elephants to come and because these are the things that we talk to them about. We create awareness through my short films that were featured on National Geographic channels as well. Asian Elephants 101 is a 26-part short docu-series. Some of them are featured on National Geographic, YouTube, Nat Geo Wild channel, I believe. So we show those feature films and we translate them into their language and they understand the value of protecting elephants, but also the value of protecting elephants to sustain their own livelihood. And so it has become a win win situation where they're now actually becoming guardians and protectors.
It's amazing. Being able to support those populations is super important, so what you're doing is amazing there. Really
Thank you. Mm,
really showing people that you can coexist, and so many of these people have lived their whole lives with elephants, and they've probably been terrified of them, and now they're seeing a different way of living with them and seeing that they can appreciate elephants and benefit from them, which is the way that it should be.
yeah, exactly. And I think it's the younger generation that are a little bit more intolerant. The older generations, as I mentioned about the cultural connection with Lord Ganesh, they
Mhm.
worship elephants because they feel elephants are the embodiment of Lord Ganesh. And so there's that reverence and respect for elephants. So
Yeah.
that comes to play, of course. While at the same time, the younger generation is now getting disinformation. You know how that goes, right? On social media. And it's just, it's hard. And so that's one of the reasons we are now also going to be sharing our research on education that was actually just published in Frontiers Ethology, which is the first time ever we have written a published paper. And again, that was with the support of National Geographic. So that has now really taken shape in West Bengal, but we're going to bring it in Odisha as well. And we're in discussions with our local team there and look forward to kind of taking it into schools. Because when you start at a younger age, then you instill these values in their minds, and then they look at elephants with great respect and reverence.
Yeah, absolutely, and it denormalizes what
Yeah.
they are seeing all around them. Like you were saying with seeing temple elephants since you were a child. So many people have seen temple elephants their whole life, and so by the time they're, your grandma's age when you ask that question, she's like, "It's always been this way. They're always around like this." So being able to denormalize that is so important so that kids begin to question what's happening and realize, yes, this is my culture and this is my religion, but I have the ability to make a change to that and it doesn't need to be this way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Sangita, there's immense elephants suffer immensely in all kinds of contexts, and we're doing this work and recognize that that's the case. But you're also suffering immensely in doing this work. You haven't said that to me, but I'm sure that I'm sure that that's true. And, the question really is, well, how do you deal with that? How do you compartmentalize that if that's something you do? How do you keep doing this? The frustrations that you run against are, most people would give up. it would be very easy to give up, and you keep going, death threats notwithstanding. And I know there are some stories where you've done things that are extraordinarily just plain brave. But the suffering and the trauma, how do you deal with that? How do you negotiate that?
So it all began when I produced this film, Gods in Shackles. And I had this 25 hours of footage. I had to bottle up everything, my emotions, and I had to say, okay, let us prioritize the protection of the elephants, make sure that we end the suffering of the elephants. Meanwhile, my own suffering was constantly happening in the undercurrents. There's this percolation of emotions happening. I would always like dust it away and say, I'll come back to you later. It got to a point where it just caught up to me. Aside from watching these footage or the segments over and over and over again to really understand how do I construct this story and make it, a full documentary. Then I had to write the script. In order to write the script, I had to watch the interviews. In order to fill up the interviews, I had to watch the footage over and over again to make sure that the interviews were filled up with proper footage, pertinent footage, and then editing. So layers and layers and layers of watching the same suffering. And I had bottled it all up until 2017. So in 2013, I began this process. In 2017, what happened is when I was feeding an elephant, it was a captive elephant, and I didn't know that he hated humans so much. I had fed about 17 elephants, and because the movie was launched in the Legislative Assembly, the elephant mahouts, they did not want to say anything because they thought I was a VIP, whatever. And they allowed me to feed the elephants when they could have easily said, this elephant is a little bit, angry. So I would rather you not feed the elephant. But I fed him anyway. He just knocked me down. Like with his big head, he hit my head this side. The impact was so severe that it went down to my foot. My foot twisted and I broke the tibia, fibula, and the toe bones. Like I had 5 bone fracture. And I was forced to be disabled and stay at home for a year and a half. That's when the emotions started coming out. That's when I'm like, okay, this is like, the universe asking me to slow down and just deal with my emotions. And that's when I really went deep and connected with my own spirit. Why is it that the suffering of the elephants mattered so much to me? That's because I myself was subjected to suffering and abuse as a child. And so the suffering is what drew me because I had gone through the suffering. And that connection is what I was able to make. When I was injured on my foot, I thought to myself, I can't even lie down. How can those elephants walk with those shackled uh, flesh hanging out and blood oozing out? So there's this whole connection that started, it all came full circle. And what I started doing was journaling madly, releasing all my emotions. I do that to this day.
Hmm.
And I wrote like about, I don't know how many diaries. I probably have about 7 or 8 diaries, and I compiled everything, and that's how my book, Gods in Shackles, came about, because I thought I have to share with people not just the documentary, but the journey into the making of the documentary, the suffering that I had to go through, the suffering that elephants go through, and how similar their sufferings are to ours. And so to this day, I do get angry, I do get upset, I do get frustrated. What I do is I take a detox from social media and I go within, I start journaling. I
Hmm.
put out all my emotions in my journal and I try to, remind myself the cultural conditioning that needs to be unlearned, right? So it takes a longer time to unlearn and relearn. So that's what is going on right now. But that's what I myself had to deal with. And so this emotional journey still continues. I still feel very depressed, very hurt. I still come home sad and I fall sick physically because it manifests, stress manifests physically. And I just give myself time and space and I'm gentle and kind with myself because I remind myself that if I fall sick, I cannot do anything for the elephant.
Mm.
So for their sake, I have to look after myself.
A lot in there. There's a lot in there,
Yeah.
Sangita.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think what you said about drawing those parallels between people and elephants resonates with people because when we put ourselves in their position and we, say, okay, say you just had a surgery or an injury and a lot of people have severe depression after those kinds of things because their life is so altered. And being able to step outside of yourself and say, okay, but this is, 50 years for this animal. Imagine that
Yeah,
is such a powerful message to send to people.
thank you.
I have a few rapid fire finisher questions. If elephants could speak directly to the world, what do you think they would say?
My suffering is your suffering. So let us end the suffering together and let us coexist.
Period. Perfect.
I love it.
Perfect.
Yeah, that is a great one. What have you learned from elephants that you otherwise may not have been exposed to that has changed how you think about freedom, empathy, or even humanity?
Oh my goodness. Every time you watch elephants in the wild, you see that they collaborate. And working collaboratively is so critical for us nonprofits in the world. Rather than competing against each other, let us collaborate so we can collectively make a difference in the lives of elephants.
Yeah, couldn't agree with that more. And my last one is we want everyone listening to feel empowered while listening to these conversations, even though we're talking about some heavy stuff. So, with that in mind, what is something anyone and everyone can do to help elephants?
First of all, learn, educate yourself. Don't blindly, impulsively comment on social media. Read the post and watch the video before commenting. That's number one. Secondly, share whatever you're learning with everybody, your family, friends, and share on social media. Third, contribute, donate where you can, because there are so many good nonprofits that are actually supporting. If you want to support ours, vfaes.org. If you want to support Weeping Elephant Project, we are all doing great work collectively together. So those three things itself can help. Help educate yourself, then help create awareness, donate, go visit ethical sanctuaries like Bless.
100%.
Whom do you admire?
Jane Goodall, hats off.
Speak a bit about your relationship with Jane Goodall.
My goodness. She is my mentor, my guide, my spirit, and even from the ethereal world, she connects with me. And I've been so honored and humbled to receive her forward to my book, Gods in Shackles. She's endorsed our work, all of my documentaries, our Voices for Asian Elephants. I mean, I am so blessed to have had a deeper connection with her, and I really miss her presence on our planet, her physical presence, because, she has a very unique way of communicating with people, in a very sort of easy to understand. Although she's Dr. Jane Goodall, she prefers
Yeah.
being called Jane. She's so humble. She comes down to earth, literally sits on the ground and touches the mud for people to see that she's so earthy. And she's like the matriarch of the elephants, right? And of humans for me. And so I really appreciate her constant presence in my life, and I miss her. And I worry that we don't have any more of those, gigantic, amazing conservation leaders that have this real incredible presence and knowledge that our world has sadly lost. So I hope that whatever she has left behind in terms of her videos and her research and everything and her books. People just go out and get it and just read it. She always talks about the indomitable spirit, which is what she wrote in the book that, I bought from her. And she said that your indomitable spirit to continue to protect the elephants gives me hope. And so I keep looking at that constantly and I remind myself I got to keep going. Yeah.
How did you first meet Jane Goodall?
So through Gods and Shackles,
Okay.
actually, when the movie was released, there was one person at the United Nations Cultural Department who reached out to me, and I was just having a conversation, and he said, "Do you know Jane Goodall?" I said, "I don't know her. I have heard of her, of course. She's a conservation giant." And so he said, "Well, I know her. Let me see if she'd be willing to see the documentary." She not only saw the documentary, but she wrote an amazing endorsement. And then, I asked to see her in person, and we met through Zoom and we connected. Then when she was in Toronto, I went and met her a few times, and our relationship only grew. And yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah. It's also amazing, like you said, for somebody who is so famous, for lack of better words,
Yeah.
to be so grounded and so eager to support projects all over the world, To say, "Yeah, of course I'll write a forward to a book. Of course I'll watch a documentary. Of course I'll hop on a Zoom call with whoever." Like, I think that that level of groundedness and humility is something that is missing nowadays as well, of people feeling like their time is better spent doing something else, or they don't have the time to do that because they have so many projects, but being able to just collaborate and be open and willing to chat with people, I think is really missing in the conservation world, and that's something that Jane Goodall really did extraordinarily well.
Yeah, it's that one-on-one connection.
Mhm.
And, just kind of making you feel like, hey, we are all equal in this.
Yeah.
And that she used her celebrity pulpit to actually lift us all up. And
Yeah.
that is such a treasured gift that not too many people have. And if they do, they don't share. And
Yeah.
so you see a lot of scientists that are very successful, a lot of authors, but yeah, it's not easy to have somebody of her stature. First of all, there's nobody of her stature in my view. And so we have lost a conservation giant, and really
Yeah.
shatters me every time I think of it.
Yeah.
Oh.
As I've said, you are one of the most brave and effective
Oh, thank
advocates
you.
for elephants that I've had any contact with. And it's a pleasure to watch what you do and how you do it, and you're making a difference, and that's what we're all trying to do, but some are more successful than others, and you're highly successful, and I admire what you do, Sangeeta.
Thank you so much for taking the time to ask all these relevant and poignant questions and
Sure.
helping me bring it out so we can share it with the world. Oh, thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
If this conversation moved you, you can watch Sangeeta's documentary, Gods and Shackles, for free on Unchanged TV and learn more about the Voice for Asian Elephant Society at vfaes.org. Thank you so much for listening to Bearing Weight, and we'll see you on the next one.